Hi, friends. Good morning. And welcome for a fairly intriguing conversation on IFSC. Now, before I move on, most of you would wonder why are we looking at a report which was published in 2007 in 2020. Now, as we saw the last, we've had two webinars on IFSC. The first was a global perspective. Second, the IFSC authority. You need to understand that historically, IFSCs have played a very strong role in jurisdictions being developed as financial centers, really strong financial centers. Now, when you look at the case for London or New York, or these are hinterland based financial services center, or you look at a place like Singapore or Hong Kong or Mauritius or Dubai for that matter, DIFC, they've all grown only for because of their financial services market. And as we have seen earlier also, India is a net importer of financial services, a country which is given zero to the world or which is known to export tremendous brains on financial services. How could we even be an importer of financial services? So it is in this regard that we thought, let's try and understand or spend some more time to get into the details of why India is where we are and how things can improve, because this was a report which was submitted just before the world global financial crisis in 2008, and because of which this report was, I mean, the proposal of IFSC was moved to the back burner. But things are changing. Things are certainly changing. The gift city, which we will be seeing in some time from now, is India's answer to this proposal. I would sincerely thank Gracelyn and Jugal for their efforts, because please understand, friends, this is a very complicated report. It's a 280-page report which was submitted by the IMF economist uh, to the government of India in 2007 to convert Mumbai into a financial services center. And there were some prerequisites for this, which for some good or bad reason did not take off. And finally, we've had uh, Gujarat being made the IFSC. So the agenda, these are some of the terms we shall see. It's a fairly large set of abbreviation. We shall see them as and when we move into the presentation. So we'll quickly look at the emergence of IFSCs, the recent ones, the domestic and offshore demands for IFSCs in India, IFCs. So IFC is International Financial Center and IFS is International Financial Services. uh, Market deficiencies, why Indian systems are not, why India is not a great place for financial services thanks to our governance, the tax policies, and what are the proposals and the way forward. So this is what situation existed in 2008 and why India should have converted or metamorphed itself into an IFSC. But ultimately, this happened. This became a reality in 2015. To quickly look at a high-powered expert committee was set up on making Mumbai an IFC in 2007, which was supposed to report to the finance ministry. And the committee was headed by an ex-World Bank economist, Percy Mystery. And in the light of the issues regarding the Indian financial system, the committee recommended a phased and a specific action plan for developing Mumbai as an IFC, and we shall look at what are the aspects around which the committee expressed its views. Now, with the reintegration of national capital and banking markets, the OECD countries opened up their capital account. Now, here, let me give you a brief background on FEMA. If you notice in FEMA, we have a free convertibility on current account, but whereas capital account is concerned, we still have to go through an approval regime. For example, if you are to import or export, you don't need RBI's approval. But when it comes to importing capital, you have FDI guidelines and FPI guidelines. Or investing, you've got ODI guidelines. Or borrowing from abroad, you have ECB guidelines. So it is in this regard that what technically happens is, for the government of India, we still, on the RBI, we still do not have a free convertibility on the capital account. In 1996, the IMF contemplated making an open capital account a membership criterion And at that time, India first considered reopening its capital account. Financial services were tradable across borders. Singapore is a classic example. The IFS market became extremely competitive with buyers and sellers around the world having a choice of procuring IFS from competing IFCs. Consequently, the growth of Indian economy and more rapid growth of cross-border financial flows created substantial local demand for IFS. Considering the contribution of financial services to GDP at 5% in 2007, with an employment of around 3 million people and an estimated market cap of $200 billion, it was suggested that India, if it builds an IFSC, a full fledged IFSC, the earnings out of that financial services could be tremendous. Now, again, here I would go back to the report of Surjit Balla Committee, where they said India is currently importing close to $500 million of financial net importer, a country which is so good in its mathematics, so good in its financial space. If you notice, we have the second largest body of accountants in the world, and we have all your IITs and IIMs in India, and we still import. And these are the guys who go and fill your offices in Wall Street and Nasdaqs and London and every other place. It is a shame that we still import. So it was anticipated that if Mumbai becomes an IFC, a South African rail project could issue a bond in the primary market, considering Mumbai's sophisticated financial securities markets. And a good number of asset managers who were running global portfolios would be able to assist the transaction. So, this is typically what happens, friends. So, if let's say tomorrow for Chennai Metro Rail, you want to raise funds. Today, what happens? The central government funds it, or we go to some multilateral institutions. Imagine you have a stock exchange where the central government, where the Chennai Metro Rail could list its instruments, and there were investors and sellers in that market. I mean, that will be tremendous. This is what happens in the US. So, creating an IFC in India required that Mumbai must be viewed competitive in the eyes of South African Railway. This is only an example. And in the eyes of global bond investors when compared with alternatives like Singapore or London. Raising the issue of creating an IFC in Mumbai also suggested that the need for more intensive deregulation and liberalization of financial system was anticipated, because India was always criticized for being one of the most regulation prone jurisdictions. So the three main perspectives were looked into for generation of revenue from export of financial services. The primary bond market issuance by South African entity. Second, the primary bond purchases by global and Indian investors. Third, the secondary bond trading was also required. Now, these were some of the highlights. So, where people should look at India as a place to list, India should have investors and it should also have traders. I think as long as this is done, India will effectively have a vibrant financial services space. Now, what is the timeline? So, this was proposed at this point, it is not relevant. 2007 to 12, Mumbai should connect with India's financial system with the world's financial market through IFS. And then India must develop the capacity to compete with the three established GFCs, London, New York, and Singapore, for global IFS business that goes beyond meeting India's needs. Emergence of international financial centers. So this is where we will look at the global example and see how we can fit. So, what are the implications for India and the need for Mumbai to emerge as an IFC, and why Mumbai can become a natural IFC? If you see, the focus of the world economy was increasingly shifting to Asia, where we had Japan, India, China, and the ASEAN countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh. All these are now prominent players in the global supply chain. On account of which India's needs for IFS was expected to grow exponentially as a global trade and investment account for a larger proportion of its economy. And India can no longer be only an importer of IFS. So there was this need to develop our own IFS capabilities. And the critical importance of ingredients for developing an IFS capability was IT, human capital, which India already had a natural advantage. Similarly, India's aspiration to have an IFC in Mumbai was with the motive to connect the Indian financial system with the global financial system. Mumbai is always known as a financial capital of India, and it already had an exchange infrastructure, which today is considered one of the best in the world, be it your NSE or BSE, in terms of its technological space, but not in terms of the products what we provide for. Now, why Mumbai should be a international financial center and not a regional finance? We saw earlier in our last webinar what are the various types of IFCs: regional financial center, global financial center, international financial center, as well as a national financial center. So all types of IFCs are international in the sense that they deal with flow of finance and financial products across borders. But the scope was differentiated because we saw that there were about 15 to 16 service verticals which were possible, and the mix of the service verticals would make whether an IFC was a global or a regional or a international space. The high powered committee, which was tasked to consider making Mumbai an RFC, deliberately chose that Mumbai should become an IFC on the following reasons. Why these are so important, friends, is in future when we look at Gujarat, the gift city, you will try and understand that this was a basis for the gift city to be formed. While Singapore, London, and New York serve the global economy well beyond meeting the IFS needs of their regions, they are classified as global than regional. In that sense, the committee saw that the potential for Mumbai to be a regional financial center for South Asia due to geopolitical realities, because it was identified that India's immediate neighbors, Indonesia, Philippines, Myanmar, would prefer to use Dubai or Singapore for their IFS needs. And what we also must understand is the time zones also make a lot of difference. We'll be looking at it in some time from now. Mumbai was expected being an IFC serving India in the first stage and leapfrog to serve the global economy in its next stage. That's why the 2007 to 12 and 12 to 20 was set up. The emergence of Mumbai as a GFC would eventually depend on whether the conditions necessary to meet that role, which typically meant having a more liberalized regime, infrastructure, etc., would be met by the authorities. So the irony was that if South Asia's geopolitics was eventually ironed out and reach an equilibrium that permits meaningful economic interaction, Mumbai could become an RFC after it has achieved the GFC status. Then again, we had two issues. So one thing making Mumbai an IFC was considered done. Now, how do we go about doing it? Do we go about using this SEZ model, or do we have an IFC? This is again very interesting for us to understand. So when you look at an SEZ model, a special economic zone, we all know that from a typical tax angle, an EOU or an SEZ is considered as an offshore region, and whatever happens there, domestic authorities do not have a jurisdiction. But when it comes to an IFC model, an IFC is you set up as an entity which is independent of the SEC strategy, which has a completely different perspective and approach to the whole game. Let's figure out what are the pros and cons of each of these approach. So if we take an SEC based approach, it was fairly easy because we already had the existing infrastructure, and an IFC would setting up going by the SEC would suspend the Indian controls and of course our regressive financial policy zone. The argument was also made that an SEC would have a world-class urban infrastructure within the SEC. I mean, we have about 340 special economic zones in India. And the argument was also made that the SEC would have a world-class urban infrastructure and thus bypass the intractable urban infrastructure deficit and the enormous governance problems of Mumbai. Because if NSE and BSC locations were made in IFSC, you are talking about setting it up only in existing infrastructure. But if you're going to take a special area of 500 acres and start doing it, developing it as an SEC, that becomes a very different ballgame altogether. In the committee's view, for the proponents of the IFC model stated that if an enclave approach, which is SEC, was used, India's hinterland advantage would be lost. This is very important for us to understand what do you mean by this hinterland advantage. You look at a place like Singapore or Hong Kong. These are all island nations where the domestic markets are not very deep. If you look at classic example is Singapore, it's a square kilometer city. Invariably, Singapore is used by foreign countries to come and list there because Singapore has good access to investors and traders. But what does Singapore itself have? Does Singapore have enough number of domestic companies of size to list? The answer is no, which is not the case with a place like India. India has a multi-trillion dollar market cap is also is vibrant when it comes to its stock exchange. BSC and NSE especially has really material trading volumes, and which is why this is what we call as a hinterland advantage. The hinterland advantage should not be lost, and India should be entire system should be developed as an integrated international financial services center, similar to London or New York. An SEC with no proper internationally accepted regulators will not be respected. And an SEC model it will become like a DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center. It would inevitably necessitate additional regulation to avoid leakages of financial products and services between the SEC and the mainland India. Also, an SEC based IFC will create opportunities for arbitrage between these two jurisdictions, which is not good for any country. So, domestic and offshore demand for IFS in India, IF International Financial Services. So, if you look at it, friends, in 1991, India's growth when the liberalization started, the cross-border flow started, and on current account and capital account combined, the flows rose from 105 billion in 1992, which is less than 32% of the GDP, to $658 billion in 2005, which is more than 90%, and the number remains at around 88% in 2018-19 itself as well. A current and capital account flows invariably necessitate requirement of IFS, International Financial Services. And India-related purchase of IFS are related to inbound and outbound FDI and FPI. As India engages more with the world, the stock of assets held in India by foreigners increases and similar and vice versa. It is to be noted that the total gross transaction in India's balance of payments accounts, after having grown at a CAGR of 12% from for 11 years from 92-93 to 2003-4 has now increased to 35%. So typically the international trade volumes have grown by 35%. Trade volumes include both export and import. The proliferation of Indian MNCs operating around the world and the transfer pricing with their subsidiaries has led to IFS demand for fundraising, corporate treasury, and global tax management. Now, this will give you a beautiful perspective. The year-on-year rate of growth of gross flows on current account. Current account is trading flows. Of course, the outflows have far outweighed inflows thanks to oil dependency on oil, but still the inflows have also grown. See, these are percentage growths, so we are always at between 20 to 30% growth. And the gross cross-border financial inflows, if you notice in absolute terms, we are at total flows about $657 billion. This is as far as 2005-6. That number is well over $1 trillion as we speak. The CAGR growth comparison during selected reference period. Again, the CAGR growth from 2002-3 to 1993 has been about 148% on the capital outflows. Tremendous amount of outflows which have happened. 2002 to 2006 itself was 66%. So total external flows when it comes to the growth has been about 29% between 2002 to 2006. It's again, this is annual growth. We're talking about significant numbers here. Trends in balance of payment components. Again, the total external flows trends in balance of payment is 90%, 90.6%. So the external flows have increased from 47% of GDP in 92-93 to 90% in 2005-6, which illustrates the potential generated by India's globalization for providing IFS through IFC in Mumbai, and the deceleration in India's globalization since 2002. What are the estimates of consumption of IFS by India? On an average, IFS revenue would work out to 2% of gross flows. That's roughly about $13 billion of IFS purchased by Indian clients in 2005. Now, regardless of the arguments of broad estimates made, the committee was of the view that the globalization over growth multiplier would drive Indian demand for IFS more rapidly than the supply of IFS in India can cope up with. So, what is required? Remove capital controls at a more rapid pace, rapid deregulation and liberalization of Indian finance, accompanied by structural, institutional, and market integration of the IFS system with global markets, dramatic improvement in the quality of urban facilities and governance in Mumbai. Now, if these are there, this, these are the required supply side changes. Projections of IFS consumption. Now, if we see this is the from a BOP standpoint, it is likely to go from 1,180 billion to 2,300 $2.3 billion. I mean, that's a tremendous growth of almost 120% in a span of 5 years. So the deeper the globalization will occur with global MNCs in India as a share of intra-firm and inter-firm transactions, but intra-industry in world trade increases. It is also projected that the projection of total gross cross-border flows towards GDP would rise to 100% of GDP by 1415. The number is well over 100% as we speak now in 2019-20. It is also identified that the biggest economic gains would be achieved when India takes the next step in moving from modest barriers to no barriers. So, where there's also a beautiful thought process where instead of being a rule based system, we should be more a principle based system. So, IFS customers outside India as a market for IFC in Mumbai. Although Indian customer base were to give Mumbai a clear startup advantage, Mumbai had the potential as an IFC to go beyond the confines of India and serve the global clientele similar to London, New York, or Singapore. I'll give you a perspective of how India can serve. If you look at globally, friends, there are about 500 funds, India centric funds, which invest $350 billion of foreign portfolio investments into India. But none of these funds are located in India. They are located outside India, in Mauritius or Singapore. Look at it. These are funds only investing in India, which are effectively manned by Indian fund managers, and they raise capital from abroad, but they don't work out of India. This is a classic, and we spend close to $2 to $2.5 billion as service fee towards these funds. This is a case of importing financial services. This entire money can be brought back to India. Fund management will be out of India, and more importantly, high-end, high-paying jobs will be out of India, both direct and indirect. The direct fees which that IFS in Mumbai might generate between 2010 to 15 was calculated. And if you notice, the projection of fees is roughly about $70 billion by 2015. Of course, we didn't start by then, but that's the amount of revenue which India has lost by not starting. And the global IFS market across, and you would see people who are dominating this global IFS market: UK, US, the blue ones are UK, US, Germany to a very small extent. So you need to be at least 5% of market share in any of these spaces, be it cross-border bank lending, foreign equities, turnover, foreign exchange, exchange-traded derivatives, OTC derivatives, etc. And international market, the other markets like, I mean, UK by far, the international bond market, secondary market, UK by far leads it with close to about 70%. And we also saw the currency trading space. UK's currency trading volumes are $3,500 billion a day. And the next competition is New York, which is 1,500 billion. A credible Indian IFC, which is the requirement, the need of the hour. Having considered the home market advantage and the offshore demand for IFC in India, the committee felt that significant financial reforms were required to unshackle the Indian financial system and make it globally competitive. And in the delay to do so, the more capable Indian firms will have no option but to establish full scale operations elsewhere. A direct customer base with rapidly growing IFS needs was projected to provide an IFC in Mumbai with a comparative and competitive advantage that can be sustained for the foreseeable future, similar to the three established GFCs, global financial corporations. So when we look at global comparing Mumbai against emerging IFCs, so if we look at Hong Kong, Seoul, Sydney, Dubai, or Labuan, The demand for IFC, domestic demand, we are by far compared to any of these spaces. The demand from regional clients, we hardly have any demand, and the demand from global clients is zero. It's primarily because we have not marketed and we don't have that setup. Comparing Mumbai with internationally established setups, domestic demand, we are at par with New York or London or Tokyo or Frankfurt, which is great. Regional and global demand is where we completely lose out to established players as well. So now look at it from augmenting IFS provision versus BPO. Because BPO, we are considered to be one of the topmost players in the world. Now, of course, you see Philippines, you see Bangladesh and other players catching up. An outsourcing approach to IFS provision and IFC development. Because one way is, let's start creating a BPO market for this, for the IFS. So the BPO of individual processes occurs at a considerable distance from the point of customer contact where the eventual resynthesis occurs. India was highly successful as a BPO venue by 2007 for global financial services industry, where we used to do the loan processing, transaction processing here. The finance-related BPO and KPO build up skills in India and increase a mind share of India amongst global financial position. But what the committee also felt is India should not be viewed as a low-end service provider. We should be viewed as a high-end service provider in this space. What was happening? So when it comes to the BPO industry, we were doing equity research, credit research, trade execution, risk modeling, data setup, reconciliation services, managing receivables and payables. So all these were so many services which we were otherwise also doing, and we were also building up the related backend technological support for this. But when you look at the difference between a BPO and a IFS through IFC, of course, BPO is a low value, low skilled activity. IFS is really high end services which involve intense interaction, interpersonal information flows, and complex negotiations with highly qualified professionals. And BPO services are more process driven, which are codified in a manual and repetitively performed. Some of the outsourced financial services include credit risk, stock market research, KPO value chain. Whereas when it comes to IFC, it involves dealing interaction with qualified and internationally known financial firms in an IFC, and this is what Indian financial firms should strive to get, where we get to the highest end. Asset management in Mumbai based on algorithmic trading, again, a large opportunity. See, at this time when this paper was introduced, algo trading was more a jargon than reality. Today, it has become a reality. So, what is this algorithmic trading? A computer is fed with certain patterns, a computer program, and the program automatically executes trade on behalf of its beneficiaries. So, this is where a computer has got a direct market access. I mean, it's a fairly high end solution which very few entities globally are using it. But yes, at that time, this was viewed, and they felt that India could be a basis for algorithmic trading based on direct market access. Making progress along IFC evolution and BPO. So finally, the committee's outlook was India has a great skill advantage, we have a process advantage, and we have a technological advantage. We should use the BPO as a base, but focus on more high value services through the IFC route. What is India's advantages in creating our own IFC? If you look at local demand is tremendous. This is what we call as a hinterland advantage. Human capital, we have by far one of the best supplies of quality manpower at one of the most reasonable prices. Location, from a time zone space, we have a 4 to 5 hour leap over London, and we are also more than an hour's distance over Singapore and Shanghai. But of course, not with Dubai. We have a democratic and a rule of law system. We are not an autocratic base. We follow liberal values, which is huge advantage, similar to what is there in London or New York. But we are far better than Singapore or China or Dubai in this space. Mindshare, India has already absorbed the global mindshare thanks to our BPO and KPO space. We've got a tremendous edge on this over Singapore and Dubai and even China. Post COVID, even from a psychology perspective, the soft power of India, as they call it. Strong securities market and advanced trading platforms, BSE and NSE are the third and the fifth biggest exchange in the world, and NSE is like 7, 8 times the size of BSE. India had an edge over China and Dubai, but not over Singapore in this regard. The committee held that six comparative advantages which India has, and that suggests that there is a genuine opportunity for India to be in the space. When we look at India's rankings on cross country comparison of human capital, we are number three on strategy. I mean, we are at the mid space, mid to lower end space across the high end zone of human capital, except in back office and financial analysis. I think over time, when this market matures, that will also fall in place. Ranking in terms of quality and capacity of business support services, we are there. We are in the mid space compared. Of course, we are definitely better off than Seoul, Sydney, and Dubai in most places. But yes, we still have some distance to catch up with the developed ones. Market deficiencies. This is something which we really need to understand as to what is stopping India from growing in the global league. India did not need an IFC to diversify from dependency on oil income or any other, which is the case for places like Dubai. India needed an IFC to because it was growing. It was a growing global powerhouse, and it was already one of the largest four economies in real world purchasing power. In that context, the committee felt that Mumbai should become an IFC that does not compromise at any time its prospects for becoming like the newer or established GFCs. Mumbai should not give in to emulate the easier targets of Dubai or Mauritius. We should never look at them as a target for us. So, Mumbai based IFC that is rooted in a large and efficient domestic financial market, which operates on global lines, is more likely to be successful. So, the focus should be on large comparables like New York or uh, London, and not on places like Singapore or Dubai, because we've got a much larger canvas to work with. So inadequate currency market and bond markets as far as India is concerned. So there were six deficiencies which were figured out, and we still haven't addressed all of them 13 years down the line. A liquid and efficient sovereign bond market, a wide range of essential derivatives on INR interest rates, a liquid spot market for INR denominated corporate bonds, credit derivatives on credit spreads on credit events, a liquid currency market, a full range of currency derivatives. So, a successful IFC would be where there is full financial integration with speculative and arbitrage strategies run across all kinds of financial instruments, inducing liquidity and market efficiency. See, the problem with India is we fear failure, we fear scams. So we always are saddled with over regulation. Hence, any attempt to create an IFC in India has to frontally attack the barriers that have held back the emergence of BCD nexus, which is the bond currency market nexus. And and the committee recommended that immediate creation of currency spot market with a minimum transaction of 10 million INR should be accessible to all financial firms. Market weakness. See, the mutual fund asset participation is just under 9% of GDP at that time. So today it is at 28.18 lakh on a GDP of 200 lakh. So now it's about 14%, 13 years down the line. The strategy is if India is to create an IFC, it's unavoidable to invite participation of domestic and foreign investors of adequate size who would position the economies of scale. Structural reforms to create Indian financial firms that are equivalent in size and capabilities to global counterparts is another mandate. So, the relative incapacity of institutional investors in India to be more responsive to market signals, to induce liquidity and market efficiency, and to interface between India and the world was another weak link in the Indian finance system. So, see, what typically happens is we are yet to be a fully matured space, which is completely understandable because we come from a country where two-thirds of the population are not well off. But if we are to aspire to grow to where we legitimately belong, I think certain liberal methods are required to be made, and this will tell you where we are when it comes to developing spaces. On the supply side, we are moderate. We are definitely lower than even the emerging IFCs. On the institutional space, we rank very, very poor. On services space, we are again moderate to high compared to developing markets. But against established IFCs, we are at on an average between 3 to 4 across supply institution services parameter, where most of them are between 8 to 10. Financial regime and governance, a big area of regulation. The intrinsic value of regulation for IFS production. So the financial regime governance, which is a framework of laws, is paramount. IFS exports require separation between final product and institutional policy and regulatory environment. Now, it is not about having good issuers, attractive products that are liquid and tradable, or globally competitive entities in the private sector. But it is equally important that financial regime governance is also globally competitive in meeting the best standards. See, what happens, friends, is if you are over regulated, you will never survive. You will never thrive, rather. You will survive, but you will never thrive. But for IFSCs to operate, the government should be more an enabler than a speed breaker at every particular point in time. Three levels of international competition on regulation are banning products or markets or exports, rules limiting the success of products or markets when they are permitted, like ban on DMA, direct market access for go trading, intangible issues of trust and level playing field. I mean, there are huge levels of concerns on legal and regulatory impartiality by global customers. Uh, what typically, I'll give you an example. Uh, India banned the cryptocurrency without knowing what it was. RBI banned it. Finally, the Supreme Court come and say that no, this cannot be the case. You obviously cannot ban a currency knowing what it means. Back because there was small cross country comparison comparing Mumbai against on quality and impact of financial system regulatory regime. We are at an average of 4, whereas global is between 8 to 9. Clearly shows where we are. And against developing economies, Mumbai is at an average of 3 to 4. Developing economies are between 7 to 8. Regulatory zone against established emphasis on quality, efficiency, and effectiveness of legal system. This is a space where we really need to work very, very hard. If you see globally, all these institutions are between 7 to 8. And when you look at Mumbai, India, the banned activities by far residents. The permitted activities are a handful. The banned activities are at least 6 to 7 times the number of activities. The restricted activities are few, and by and large, the others are not applicable. So the matter is that 3 years that needs to be focused upon in a fundamental way: competition policy, artificial segment of financial services, innovation. There is some issue in internet connection. Yes. So, sorry. Okay. So if you the activity or constituent IC, asset managers, banks, securities market, which are in fundraising, as management, financial market, and other activities like M&As. So now these are the players who effectively handle or effectively determine the success of it. We just took one example as to what is the enabler of financial innovation in India. So if you notice, low rate of financial innovation, the process in case of many recent attempts uh, at financial innovation in India appears to be too convoluted. So in December 1995, NSE asked SEBI for permission to trade in index futures. It took a good 4.5 years for the trading in the simplest possible equity derivative cash settled index futures to come into India. So when you have a scenario where it takes 4.5 years for the regulator to accede to give approval. I mean, you really know that where we are in terms of it must be like issuing a patent, right? You put something, you get a patent, move on. Put something, get a patent, move on. Entire process should happen in a matter of months, if not weeks. You can't take 4.5 years. Why does a financial regime governance have these limitations? First of all, our focus is on averting scams rather than promoting business. The committee suggested a principle based regulation would be more effective than a rule based regulation. So the movement has to happen from over prescriptive regulation in India, which has resulted in a state where every financial innovation requires interminable changes to be made to either governing laws, subordinated regulation, or thereby raising the cost of innovation because you are creating artificial entry barriers which are otherwise not required. Our income tax law is a classic example. The entire law is focused on catching someone who's not paid rather than helping someone to pay taxes and be more honest. Lack of competition in the financial services industry. Indian finance has a history of financial preemption. There is most policy making in finance in the past decades has been shaped by financial repression, that is lack of properly functioning bond market. So how to catch a criminal is not the justice, is not the principle of any regulation. It is how to ensure that things happen in a more fair manner. Flaws of competition policy, segmentation, and barriers to innovation have enabled and perpetuated capital controls, an autocratic mindset, the very notorious Indian bureaucratic mindset, conflicts of interest issues due to public ownership of financial firms, strategic issues of debt financing, issuance, and management. So, effectively, we are a very control centric bureaucratic regime where we find it very difficult to liberalize regimes. Reforming financial regime governance, the committee's recommendations are from a focused, from a rule based to a principle based regulation, have a unified regulator, Financial Services Modernization Act. We have the IFSC Act, which was passed in 2019, which is yet to be notified. The strategy for regulation needs to be one where the banking regulator regulates the business of banking, but does not regulate all the activities of a financial firm that chooses to call itself a bank. I think there's a huge because like RBI regulates NBFCs, they regulate now every cooperative banks. If you go to London, friends, you don't have this case of what to say. Lenders being regulated by any regulator. You have money, you can lend. It can happen at scale, and there are no regulators whatsoever. Many countries who have fragmented regulated architecture, like India, have not grown and have contrived to support the creation of virtual unified financial firm, which is able to operate in all or any areas. Considerable progress in asset management industry by separating out the regulatory and contractual structures and task of fund management, which suggests the creation of new industries of holds. Everything is regulated. Portfolio management is regulated. Lending is regulated. Raising money is regulated. And the regulations are so onerous that it takes away 30% of your management bandwidth, if not more. Again, to foster innovation without sacrificing the protection of small investors, a separate policy needs to be created for sophisticated wholesale players. Creation of an environment conducive to exit. Whenever you interact with large institutional investors, the standard feedback you get is India is a jurisdiction which wants money, which does not want people to take the money out. Regulatory impact assessments to be carried out periodically to review regulatory architecture and implementation similar to what happens in OECD jurisdictions. Significant improvements to be made in the Indian legal system in resolving disputes. We have 3.5 crore cases at courts. No one knows but by when these would get resolved. I think thanks to COVID, the virtual courts will now make life a lot more simpler. The RBI, by its circular dated 20th Jan, stated that rupee derivatives with settlement in foreign currency shall be allowed to be traded in IFSCs. One significant progress. Tax policy for the IFSC. It recommended a rational and a fair tax system, and there must be vibrant interaction between Department of Revenue, CBDT, and CBEC. The committee also endorsed the Kelkar Committee's report proposal for including financial services under GST regime, with simultaneous removal of all central and state transactions, including stamp duty, taxes, etc. Now, if you see in the income tax, we are moving to a separate regime for IFSCs. So over a period, we've got concessional tax rates for income tax, capital gain, securities transaction tax, etc. under IFSC. Tax implications for Maharashtra and Mumbai. There is again a thought process which stated that if we are going to remove indirect taxes, isn't the government losing? I think you need to look at it from a holistic perspective where multiple regulations, multiple regulations across multiple employment opportunities would create indirect fostering of economic activity, and that would in turn expand the overall pie for the state and central government. So comparing Mumbai against existing established IFCs on taxation, if you notice, we are at anywhere between 4 to 5, whereas the other jurisdictions are between 7 to 8. So definitely not bad in that space. The problem with India is about enforcement and the bureaucratic harassment which goes through the process. So IFCs again on taxation, if you notice, Mumbai on emerging areas, emerging jurisdictions, we are at 4 to 5, whereas emerging jurisdictions are between 8 to 9. Obviously, because for most of the emerging jurisdictions are tax havens. Urban infrastructure and governance, an area of tremendous concern for all of us. Mumbai scores pathetically in that. Physical infrastructure has to be of the highest quality. You can look at New York, you can look at London, you can look at Singapore, you can look at Hong Kong, you can look at Dubai. I've been to all these places. You just cannot compare Mumbai with these. So, by and large, Mumbai itself is not a place for us to compare because one, the real estate prices are prohibitively expensive. The quality of life, I mean, is anywhere close to desirable, which is why you would see the BPO industry has moved out of Mumbai to Gurgaon or to Bangalore. Now, both these cities are also in the same place of Mumbai when it comes to quality of life. But yes, real estate costs are not as prohibitive as Mumbai is. So, Mumbai is ideally not a location for IFSC. To improve the urban governance, elementary and glaring deficiencies in urban infrastructure need to be set. The transit time from airport to the city, the quality of life, availability of other first world facilities need to be ensured for attracting global talent to Mumbai. I think which is one of the reasons why Gujarat Gift City was developed ground up for making this a reality. Now, again, comparing the quality of physical and social infrastructure between both developing and developed, India, Mumbai is about 4, whereas every other place is anywhere between 9 to 10. So, what are the other strategies proposed in this regard? Removing exit barriers for private domestic corporate players, removing entry barriers, restricting demands for reciprocal market access only to domestic financial services, reducing the extent of public ownership, because the more you have public ownership, it brings down the dynamism and vibrancy, encouraging the emergence of Indian large complex financial institutions, removing existing barriers to friendly or hostile mergers and acquisition takeovers. And just give us a second. Macroeconomic management strategy for public debt financing. So, creating a vibrant, competitive IFC would require success in meeting the legal commitments of the government and to reduce the consolidated fiscal debt. If you see, the consolidated fiscal debt was 5.1 in 2006-7, it's now 5.9. Reducing the total public debt. So, the total public debt, which was at 80%, is now 45.6%. Of course, there are still a lot of off balance sheet items which needs to be considered. Taking that, we should be about 70% at this point. Uh, the committee also recommended a reform of the taxation system on the revenue side and avoid price distorting subsidies on the expenditure side. Full capital account convertibility was considered as one of the desirable options. It advocated opening up fully foreign investment in INR denominated sovereign bonds issued by GOI. The Masala bonds was introduced in that manner, but now RBI says Masala bonds is also part of the ECB regime. It also stated that the function of Public Debt Management Office should be placed in the Ministry of Finance rather than a regulatory institution to avoid any perceptions of conflict of interest. And of course, full capital account convertibility was promoted. So, looking ahead, the growth of IFS was inevitable. But post 2008, the financial crisis, and the contrary to the expectation of 2015 budget, preferred Gujarat's gift city for development as GFC. And it's clear through the committee's report that India has several strengths in its edge to become an IFS, and not just by itself, but for the region, if not for the world. So this was one of the path-breaking papers. Unfortunately, has received very little attention. The kind of impact it can have on future of India is tremendous, friends. So we thought it is anything in the interest of the nation and for all us financial professionals to have a great understanding as to where India is, what our strengths are, where we are globally, and what we need to do to get to where we actually belong. And I'm sure the government's attention is also in this direction. And it's only a question of time. When I say time, close to a decade from where we are now, India should have one of the best IFSCs in the world. So thank you for being part of this conversation. Hope to catch up with you sometime in future. Thank you.